Does your thesis say something worthwhile? You might be tempted to automatically say, yes, I wrote it. Of course it's worthwhile. But as part of your rough draft check, you should really ask yourself the hard question of whether or not your paper is doing work that you're proud of. And this video is going to help you do that work. If you've checked out previous videos in this series, you already know what a thesis statement is, but just to make sure we're on the same page, let's review it again. A thesis statement gives your readers the main point of your paper. We usually find them in academic assignments designed to be informative or persuasive, such as reports, research papers, argumentative essays, and compare-contrast assignments. We usually don't find them, at least not in this direct way we're talking about here, in narratives, which are just another word for stories, or more creative work. Within these academic assignments, the thesis statement is usually a single, well-written sentence. It's going to be expected by readers of the most common academic assignments, and it is usually located in the first paragraph of your paper. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's get to the main point of this video. So what? Imagine your reader asking that question about your paper. Do you have an answer? Did your thesis statement make that answer clear? If not, it's time to do some revision. It might sound rude, but you really do need to ask yourself, who cares? When you're looking at your thesis statement, if you, that is the person who actually wrote this thing, can't answer that question, then that's not a great sign for your paper. To be fair, not every paper has to go down in history as the greatest thing ever written. We're not expecting the impact of the Gettysburg Address with every school assignment. And the cold, hard truth is, not every reader is going to care about your ideas. Not everyone is your audience. Some of them are going to be bored or just flat out uninterested in the topic. And while your paper doesn't need to be perfect, in fact, there's no such thing as a perfect paper, it should be something you're proud to turn in, and it should be about something that matters to you. If it matters to you, it's going to be a lot more interesting to read for everyone. So let's look at some of the common issues that can keep your thesis statement from being worthwhile. And, we're talking specifically about thesis statements, but really, if your main idea isn't worthwhile, that means your whole paper isn't worthwhile. So problem number one is you phoned it in. Have you heard this phrase before? Phoning it in comes from old theater slang, which means a part was so small it could have been called in by phone instead of the actor showing up on the stage. Today, we use the phrase to mean that someone put in minimal effort just to meet the requirements, but they didn't show any real interest or passion in it. Let's face it, sometimes school assignments can be boring. Sometimes you don't really care about doing them. Sometimes you just want to get them done so you can move on to something else. But if you phoned it in too much, if you really didn't care about the topic, it can negatively impact your work. And it usually shows up in your thesis statement. If your thesis statement feels dull, lifeless, and uninteresting, chances are your whole paper is going to fall flat. So how do you fix it? Well, the easiest thing to do is to pick a topic you really care about before you get to the drafting phase. But for this discussion, I'm going to assume you already have a draft. If that's the case, my first piece of advice is to get some distance from your work. If you realize that your thesis statement is dull and flat, take a break, put the draft away, close the computer, take a walk, sleep on it if you have the time, come back to it with fresh eyes. Once you've done that, reread your paper and look for sparks. Try to find moments where you did feel interested and engaged. Build on those. See how you can tie them back to your thesis. Sometimes a dull and lifeless first draft is your way in. Sometimes you have to write the boring draft to find the more exciting parts of the topic. Don't be afraid to rewrite parts or even all of your paper. It's not wasted time if it helped you find something meaningful to say. Another problem you might find if your thesis statement is not really saying something worthwhile is that your scope is just too broad. Scope is just a word for how much you're trying to cover in your paper. Most academic assignments are relatively short, between 2 and 15 pages or so. There's only so much you can cover well in such a short space. Take a look at this thesis statement. Since the dawn of time, human beings have lived as social creatures and connections between family, friends, and neighboring groups to find identities. Whoa, you're going to talk about all humans since the dawn of time, in every era, on every continent? And you're going to talk about not just their family connections, but also their friends and their neighbors in one paper? That's a lot to cover, and chances are you can't really do it well. So how do you fix it? Zoom in. Take your thesis statement as a starting off point and dive deep to find a more specific piece to discuss. Consider this revised thesis statement. Human beings living in early agricultural societies found identity through specializations that changed their interactions with peers. I'm still talking about social interactions of humans in history, but I've narrowed the scope to make it manageable, and that makes my paper more worthwhile because I can give some actual details instead of trying to cover every single thing in history. The last problem we're going to discuss is what happens when you haven't done enough work yet to really know what you want to say. In this case, your thesis statement may end up kind of saying nothing. Let's look at this example. In Sarah Beth Durst's novel Even and Odd, there are two sisters who share magic powers. This is true. This is an accurate statement, but it's also something that someone who read the back cover of the book or even just looked at the front cover long enough would know. It doesn't really tell the reader anything meaningful or interesting about the book. Chances are that the reason this thesis statement is so blah is because I haven't really done my homework yet. I didn't read the book carefully enough. Maybe I didn't even read the book at all and I'm trying to fake it because I'm up against a deadline. Whatever the case, I have not done the deep work that gives me the ideas to make a meaningful paper. And it's probably going to show up in my thesis statement that I didn't do my homework. So how do you fix it? I bet you know what I'm going to say. You do the homework. Whatever it is you need to do to really understand your topic, go do that. Do it before you write any more. If you need to read a book, find articles, take better notes, conduct interviews, brainstorm about your own memories, watch videos, whatever it is you need to do to make you knowledgeable enough to create a good paper, go do that. Look at my new thesis statement. I've gotten much more specific because I actually read the book and have ideas worth sharing. In Sarah Beth Durst's novel Even and Odd, the sharing of magic acts as a metaphor for being torn between two worlds, something that happens in real life too. That's a paper I can write. That's a paper that's going to be much more interesting than that earlier one. The bottom line is that you are the one who determines whether your paper is worthwhile, and you do that by picking a topic that really matters, making sure it has a manageable scope, and doing the work to think deeply as you write. If you create something that you're proud of and that you care about, that energy is going to come through in everything you do. So if you make that a priority, your work is going to be better for it.